Have to start this one off with one of those overly dramatic YouTuber sighs. You know, one of them that goes... Because, look, I'm a younger brother, okay? So I grew up, my older brother would hog the consoles, so I was relegated to handheld gaming, and that's where, you know, I cut my teeth on all of these amazing games on the GBA, on the GBA SP, DS, PSP, and that gets us onto Ratchet and Clank Size Matters, which recently just came to PS5, true PSP backwards compatibility. It has trophies, it runs pretty good, it looks pretty good too, and I loved this game growing up, because throughout my whole life, I was always the handheld gamer, and I love Ratchet and Clank. Ratchet and Clank is probably my favourite series of all time. It's up there with Zelda, and Ratchet and Clank, they're probably the two that would battle it out at the top of the mountain. And I loved Ratchet and Clank 1, 2, 3, Gladiator, every single Ratchet and Clank game I really enjoy. Now, the only one I haven't played are Secret Agent Clank and Q-Force, which I will get around to at some point on this channel. I'll never forget the day I got Ratchet and Clank 1 for the first time. I think Final Fantasy X or X-2 was just out. And my dad went over to GameStop with my brother, because they were into Final Fantasy. I was too young, I just watched them play. But they went over to GameStop to get Final Fantasy, and because I was there, my dad had to get me a game as well. And I remember my friends talking about Ratchet and Clank on the schoolyard, you know. They were talking about this game where you play as this man, and you have cool guns, and you're shooting guns, and you have a robot. So in my head, I had this picture of Ratchet and Clank, that it was some weird futuristic sci-fi game where you were a human. And then I saw Ratchet and Clank on the shelf, and I didn't really register that this was the game. And I remember buying it, I got home, I played the first level, and I absolutely fell in love with this series from then on, because just after I beat the first level, I got told I had to go to bed because I was very young. And then I went into school the next day, I was telling my friends about it, they were like, oh my god, that's the game we were talking about. And that's where my love for Ratchet and Clank spawned. And just like every series, I always wanted a handheld version of it. You know, I've recently bought the Crash games on the GBA. They were some of my favourite GBA games growing up, because I just loved having my home console games in my hand. So I think you can guess just how excited I was back in the day when I had my PSP and I saw there was a Ratchet and Clank game coming to it. And one funny thing about this game is that this was one of the first games that we got in Europe that actually had the sort of sexual innuendo title in it. Because over here, we had Ratchet 1, Ratchet 2, Ratchet 3, and then Ratchet Gladiator, which is deadlocked in the States. And we didn't have, like, Up Your Arsenal or Going Commando. They weren't the title, so I didn't know that for years. And then eventually, we get Ratchet and Clank Size Matters on the PSP. And to say I was excited about playing a Ratchet and Clank game on the go is a complete understatement. I absolutely adored this game when I was a kid. I bought it on the PSP, on the UND, you know, that spinny disc, and I could still hear that sound when the disc was spinning up. And then, later on, when I got a PSP Go, it was the second game I downloaded on my PSP Go. And on a side note, the PSP Go was actually a pretty cool piece of technology. I really liked the form factor back in the day, but it was definitely way ahead of its time. A all-digital PSP now, or a PS Vita, or something like that would actually work out really well. But back then, the internet infrastructure just wasn't there. And over the past week, I've played Ratchet and Clank Size Matters on the PS5. I did buy it on my Vita as well, just to try it out to see what it's like in handheld. And this game just isn't good. I don't know what young Adam was thinking. I think I was just blinded by the fact that, oh, I'm playing Ratchet and Clank in handheld mode. And yeah, this game is awful. The balancing is terrible. It feels like a downgrade from Ratchet 1 even though this game I think is technically set after Ratchet 3 or even deadlocked. I'm actually not sure. It just, in every single way, is inferior to every single other Ratchet and Clank game. And I know you'll probably say, oh, well, it's, you know, it's a handheld game, so of course it's going to be inferior in some ways. And of course, I understand that, but this game is just not fun. So we start with the controls, because I think they actually did a really good job of this, because the PSP only obviously had L and R, it didn't have 4 triggers, and it also didn't have a second analog stick. So how you move the camera is L and R on the bumpers, but now that you have a right analog stick through the PS Vita and the PS5, you can map L and R to the right analog stick, so you can move left and right with the camera, which is really good. You can look up and down, which becomes a problem, because the camera in this game isn't good. It's really tight, and I understand why it's tight. You know, this is a PSP, they couldn't have rendered as much on the screen and all this, which is totally fair. But if I'm being honest, I was so frustrated with the camera. It would glitch out in enemies, it would get too close, it would stick to walls. It was just a bad experience, and it's best highlighted when you are gliding because I don't know what they did in this game. This is why I believe this is almost like a Ratchet 0.5. It's not even Ratchet and Clank 1. It's a complete downgrade even from Ratchet 1, apart from the strafe. But when you hover in this game, it is the slowest thing in the world. You cover almost no distance, and the camera is so close you can't even see where you're going. And that's just like, you know, the bottom of the barrel scrape and stuff from this game, because it's genuinely terrible. I mean, the first level is fine. It's a very typical, you know, Ratchet tutorial level. We'll teach you how to jump, we'll teach you how to shoot enemies, we'll give you a bomb glove, we'll give you a blaster. And I kind of had high hopes for it, because once I kind of got used to this sort of camera being a bit weird, and maybe the controls are feeling 100% great, it was, you know, pretty much Ratchet and Clank. But as you go through it, you realize that this is just Ratchet and Clank. It doesn't do anything really new. The weapons aren't interesting at all, which is obviously like the reason why we play Ratchet and Clank. Like, all of these cool, unique weapons, but instead you have the Agents of Doom, you have the blaster, you have the shotgun, you have the bomb glove. And one thing about this game is that all the weapons are extremely underpowered, even in the later game when they're fully leveled up. Enemies literally take half your blaster pistol ammo to kill, and even the other weapons like the bee glove just doesn't deal any damage. The Agents of Doom, at one point they throw out these like little rolly bomb things that just almost never hit the enemy, so that's frustrating. The only weapon that really felt like it did damage was the bomb glove, and then the rest of them, especially the shotgun. The shotgun is genuinely dreadful. There's almost no feedback when you're hitting the enemies. It doesn't even feel like you're hitting them because of the lack of damage you're dealing to them. Overall, like, just from a weapon standpoint, it's the weakest, it's the worst in the series. And then you get into the balancing of this game, and it's genuinely atrocious. I don't know what high impact games are doing. I actually almost gave up on playing this because it was that bad. So firstly, enemies deal a lot of damage. Almost every single enemy will kill you in 2 or 3 hits, and some bosses will kill you in almost 1 hit, and in the case of the final boss, he actually was one-shotting me, which I just think is disgraceful. Your weapons are like pea shooters. Even the more powerful weapons like the sniper and the rocket launcher, they deal good damage, but, you know, even big enemies will still take 3, 4, 5 rockets or 2, 3, 4 bombs, and there just seems to be a delay on the bomb glove that just makes it feel awful. And then when you get into like the sort of weaker guns like the shotgun and the blaster pistol, even those small enemies, those, you know, those little enemies that you can kill with 1 wrench hit, or, you know, they might be 1 or 2 blaster shots. In this game, they're not 1 or 2 blaster shots, they're multiple blaster shots, and they're multiple shotgun blasts as well. So it just doesn't feel good from that perspective. But then you get into the boss fights, and this is where I almost gave up. Every single boss has way too much health, and you end up running out of ammo in every single one of your weapons in every single boss fight. They also almost one-shot you pretty much consistently. And then you get in to the spawning ammo crates in the boss fights, which, you know, is a typical Ratchet thing. You know, you might run out. Maybe this boss, the blaster pistol is the best thing to do to kill them with, and that's fine. And you will run out of ammo, and maybe you might have to wait for the boxes to spawn, break them, get some ammo, hope you get it for your blaster pistol, and then you can go along your merry way and deal more damage to them. But on 3 occasions, on 3 different boss fights, I ran out of bullets in every single one of my weapons, and they had over half health. And then I just had to slowly wait for boxes to spawn, break them, and hope, just pray to God that I got the ammo for the weapon that I wanted, and in most cases, I didn't. Now, luckily, in the PS5 version, you have the rewind feature, so for these bosses that were one-shotting me, eventually, I just gave up on trying to, like, go back to the start, skip the cutscene, go through their phases. I was just like, I'm done. I'm just gonna keep rewinding and just keep retrying until I beat them, and I did. And I think without that rewind feature, I don't think I would have beaten this game, because in the final third, I was really, really frustrated with how little damage you deal and how much damage you take. And it's like, there's just isn't any real redeeming factors. It's called Size Matters, where you can, Clank becomes big and Ratchet gets shrunk down in size, but it's almost non-existent in the game. You're giant Clank for like 1 mandatory mission. You are mini Ratchet when you get into the gridlocks. And just on a small note, when you get into these gridlocks and you're going on grind rails, a staple of the Ratchet series is that cool little side flip he does when he's jumping from rail to rail. But he doesn't do it. He just does this awkward vertical jump, and it just doesn't look good. The L1, R1 jump, like the long jump in this game, feels awful, and that's like honestly one of my favorite things about the Ratchet games. I love just constantly doing the long jump. That's how I get around in pretty much all of the games. I just constantly do it. And I went back and I watched Ratchet 1 gameplay, and it just looks like it feels, you know, I haven't played it in probably 5 or 6 years, but it looks like it feels way better than what this does. And I don't know, I'm kind of disappointed by the PSP, if I'm being honest, because I've played Daxter, which was a game that I really enjoyed when I was a kid, but turns out that game isn't very good. Actually, Daxter is a way better game than Size Matters. Size Matters was probably my favorite PSP game of all time, just because it is Ratchet and Clank, and I absolutely adore that series, but that game sucks. Secret Agent Clank is apparently even worse than this game, and that's a game I've never played. I do actually own a physical copy of it. My friend gave it to me. I don't own a PSP though, but I was in the process of looking into buying a PSP, but there was like certain things with batteries, and you know, the batteries don't last very long. Maybe I have to replace it. There's a chance the battery won't work. There's a chance the battery will leak. There was loads of these things going on, but now that these games are sort of coming to PS5, and I'm hoping, you know, in a year we'll have like a really good list of PSP games on the PS5. I'm not even sure if I'll get a PSP, because so far the PSP has been really underwhelming going back and playing these games. And I understand there's like a certain, you know, these are handheld games, so they are going to be in most instances lesser than their console counterparts, and I'm totally fine with that. But when I play through, like, if I can't play a Ratchet game and have fun and almost give up, then I don't think there's any hope for anybody who's like kind of only slightly into the series, because I just love Ratchet and Clank as a series. I love All for One. I like Into the Nexus. Like, Quest for Booty is fine. I'm not one of these people that are like, oh, that game sucks, or I really enjoy just this as a series. It's just, you know, nostalgia and fun platformers. You level up weapons, some funny characters, you know, I just love it. But Size Matters is not a good game. It's genuinely atrocious. I do not recommend anybody buy this game. Will I buy this game for my collection? I think you know the answer. The answer is a no. I don't have the CRT behind me here because I don't own it on the PS2, and it's like 25-30 euro over here. And even if it was like 10 euro, I wouldn't have bought it for the purpose of this video, just because I dislike the game that much. Don't play Ratchet and Clank Size Matters. I don't even really think it's worth downloading, unless you want to do like a full Ratchet series playthrough and see what a bad Ratchet and Clank game is. But if you're just a casual fan that's looking for a fun Ratchet and Clank game to play, do not play Size Matters. It's bad. I just beat Toy Story 2 on the PS5. I platinumed it. I have it physically. I actually played it on the CRT, unlike Size Matters. And guess what? Toy Story 2 holds up. So go check that out. It will be over this side. Yes. Goodbye.